was afraid of who I would become because we look at those things as those are all bad things, but it's for the greater good, right? Which is creating the life that I want. It's like fear of who you're going to become as a result of financial success. But the results were people thanked me at the end of the call. Thank you so much for having an actual conversation with me, because everyone else is just the same conversation. They, whether they close or not, they thank me for having a real conversation with them. And guess what ends up happening as a result? Most of them close. By becoming the kind of person I had to become to help prospects, I became the person I needed to become to level up in terms of my career as well.
Welcome back to another episode. I never say which episode number because I release these in whichever way I feel after we've recorded them. But welcome back to another episode. Today we have got the wonderful Princess with us. Most of you watching this will know who she is, but for those of you who don't, I'll let her introduce herself in a moment. But I think, Princess, we actually met the first time at Bill's event in London. I think that was a year ago. I get the years mixed up now.
Year and a half.
Yeah. So met you there for the first time, and then seeing your progress, from the sidelines since then has been pretty incredible to watch, to be fair. I've seen you just kind of grow and do loads of different things. So hopefully we'll get to dig into some of that today, but I'll let you do a real quick intro. Let the people know what you want them to know about you.
Sure. So yeah, I'm Princess. I'm a closer and a coach as well. I've been in the high ticket space for a little over 2 years now, and I've had a massive transformation in terms of who I am and all the things. And so I coach in the box, the objection box, and I love helping other people to become the 2.0 version of themselves too. So that way they can transform their lives and all the other people's lives and all the things. So that's me.
Yeah, awesome. Love it. Love it. And a lot to dig into, right? And a lot of cool experiences that you've had there. I think one thing you said then, and when we were talking about what to bring up on this episode and things, and there's a lot we can uncover. The one thing it never fails to surprise me or amaze me is how much sales success is tied to personal success and development and things like that. Like the skills are obviously, just as important. But when you talk about making or helping people become like 2.0 and things like that, there's a real big thing around mindset or whatever you want to call it that can really get people successful or hold them back. So when we talk about this and you've had a lot of people ask you what made you become successful, what was the thing that made the thing happen and all that. I know we wanted to touch on things like fear of success and what that actually means and what that looks like, because I think there's so many different words thrown around, it can get a little cloudy. So do you feel that is one of the biggest things that holds most people back, or do you think that's like the thing that holds people back when they're just behind kind of cracking it, if you know what I mean? Like, where do you think that kind of fits in for you on the journey?
So that's a really good question, because I've never looked at it from that perspective of like where on the journey when it comes to fear of success specifically. I think it can be right at the beginning or the middle. It just depends on the person and their situation. Because people can start their journey as their journey in sales, being the kind of person who takes risks and who's very self-aware. And so that person, they're probably not afraid of failure because they are aware enough to realize they're already failing because they're not where they want to be. And that's probably why they got into sales, right? So for that person, it might come in the beginning, that fear of success. But the thing is, and the reason I wanted to discuss it is because people don't realize it when it's lurking. How do I know this? Because that was the case for me as well. And I've talked to so many other people and they're like, shit, oh my God, this is it. This is what's held me back. And I'm like, you're welcome, because so we don't realize it because we really hear people talk about fear of failure all the time. And we don't realize that fear of success is a real thing. It sounds silly though, because it's like, why would I be afraid of being successful? This is what I'm working toward, right? Sure. The finances is what you're working toward. The lifestyle is what you're working toward. But then what comes as a result of getting that? That's the scary stuff. That's the stuff that's like lurking in the background, which is like, I'll just speak in terms of my situation, because that's, that's all I know is for me, what I was afraid of was being lonely forever, because that's what success means for me. Well, not means, but meant, and that was the boogeyman, right?
Yeah.
Because like for me personally, I always wanted to be married by the time I was 30. Um, and congrats on your engagement, by the way. Anyway, so cool. But yeah, I had always wanted to be married by 30, and I was putting a lot of time and energy toward that. I'm currently 28, and so I felt like shit, if I go all in on work and I focus on that as opposed to dating and trying to find someone, then I won't have that and I'll be lonely forever and no one will ever love me and I'll die alone with
Mm,
17 cats and all the things. But that was a real fear for me.
mm,
But I didn't realize that was lurking in the background. And so it was holding me back from going all in on my sales calls,
mm.
because I knew that if I let go and I really focus on this and nothing else, I'm not going to have that.
Yeah.
And same thing, another example of another part of life is like my friends and my family. I don't have as many friends as I did when I came to sales, because I became the boring friend, the one who never goes out, the one who's always in front of my computer, always training or working, taking sales calls. So while I was working on developing my skills, I lost a lot of friends because I stopped being around them. Same
Mm,
thing with family. My family is always complaining about not seeing me. So those are the cons, if you
yeah.
will, of success. And that's the scary shit that I didn't want to face. But once I decided to, now I'm on the other side of that and I don't regret anything.
Mm, yeah.
So
Okay.
yeah.
I think this also for me also raises a couple other questions, and oh, I'd love to break down a couple of them or ask you to. But I think if we could take one step back, how would you describe your meaning of fear of success? Because obviously when people hear that, they're probably hearing different things. So when you say fear of success, like what are you referring to kind of specifically there, do you feel?
Ooh, okay. So I used to describe it as, no, that way doesn't make sense either. I was gonna say fear of like who I'll become. No, it does
Mhm.
make sense. I'm gonna say that because that's how
Go
I think
for
of it.
it.
Like, it's fear of who I became.
Mm,
I became someone who's not fun anymore. I became someone who doesn't see my family as much anymore. Still don't. I became someone who, who's living in Mexico without, not my friends are not here. Like,
yeah.
one, because they can't afford to, but two, because I don't have very much anymore.
Yeah.
So I was afraid of who I would become, because we look at those things as those are all bad things, but it's for the greater good, right?
Mhm.
Which is creating the life that I want. So that's how I would describe it, as like fear of who you're going to become as a result of
Mm.
the financial success.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a great way, a great definition of it. And that I think that helps people align with where we're going with this conversation. So then my other question on this would be, and this is something I always wrestle with myself anyway, but something that it's a piece of advice that I always give to people as well is know what game you're playing, right? Because I think the other side of the coin is what is the success that people are wanting to achieve? Because I always like to give the stupid example, but it's a fun example of if your version of success is a household full of kids and stay at home or whatever and all that side of things, like if that's your version, then don't try and copy Elon Musk, right? Like that's not going to give you the same level. So for success, do you feel that in sales there's a overarching version of success that everyone's pretty much aiming for, or do you feel like everyone's got different versions and it's like that's kind of what they need to discover? Or if this question is making sense, like
Yeah. I mean, from my corner of sales, because I don't know, some people might be in, I don't know, dude, this space is crazy, but like from where I'm standing, it looks like most people want to be making 10 to 20,000 a month, some a lot more, but the success looks like making a lot of money so that way they can have the freedom to work less eventually,
yeah.
you know?
Yeah. So I think, yeah, so it's about understanding first what success means to know if you're going to be getting there, because I do feel sometimes people get given a meaning of success and they've not actually decided if that's real or not for them. And that can also cause issues with fear of success as well, right? Because then you're like, you're worried you're going to become someone that you didn't even want to be, or You know what I mean? And it can kind of go both ways. So when it comes to this for you, how do you feel you start to break through that fear of success? Like, what I'm not sure if there was a moment or if it was like a build up, but like, what was that journey like for you? How did you feel you started to overcome that?
I like that. I love that question. Moment. There was. There was a moment. Ugh. The moment was, it was a particular day when I just saw multiple people who I felt like were not as talented as me, didn't work as hard as me, wasn't maybe didn't want it as bad as me, win in some way. Some were sales related, some just weren't, some were just like random, but it just pissed me off. And I'm like this, and I was talking to my best friend, and I'm like, this is so unfair. So this happened and this person, and blah, 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 blah. And then my friend was just like, okay, but like that thing that you wanted, like, why couldn't you just ask for it? And I was like, well, I don't know. And I just realized, shit, I'm the problem. Like
Mm,
I didn't get opportunities that I wanted because I didn't have the courage to ask for it.
mm,
And so the difference between the people who are really successful and the ones who aren't is just the ones who are have the courage to get after it. And what
yeah.
get after it actually means is whether if it's an opportunity, actually apply for it, go for it, ask for it, take
Mm.
it. I didn't have the courage to do that because I don't know. So that day, I decided, fuck everything. Am I allowed to swear on this? Sorry.
Yeah, totally fine. It's all good. No stress.
I was like, fuck everything, fuck all of it. I don't care what people think anymore. I'm just going to back myself
Mm,
because when I do get where I want to go, no one's going to care. Like all the things I was afraid of, people's opinions, losing friends, none of it matters. I'm on the other side of it and I can confirm it doesn't matter.
yeah.
So yeah, that was the day. That was the moment, if you will.
And what changed for you in that moment? So that was like the thought process and that. Then how did you act different, or how did you, how did you notice that things were changing from that point?
I it was interesting. Like within a week of me deciding that, next thing you know, I'm having interviews with CEOs about being sales manager on different accounts. I'm within like a couple of weeks of that, I'm like having conversations with other bigger names in the space about potential joint venture opportunities and different things that I've had ideas that I wrote in my notes about and just was afraid to speak up about. I was afraid to say anything or do anything. And so I literally took action on all the things that were on the back burner that I was saving for when I'm at a higher level, for when
Mm.
I was always like, okay, well, I have this really cool idea, but I'll approach the influencer about it like after I close another 300K. Then I'll ask. It's like so stupid.
Yeah.
So I just took action on things.
Okay, it's interesting hearing you speak because I think this was before we started the episode when we were talking before, and you spoke about people need to break through to their 2.0 like a snake shedding its skin. And it's interesting hearing you talk because you got a different relationship with success, but it feels like actually you breaking through that fear of success was a different relationship to yourself, right? Because
Oh
instead
yeah.
of waiting to hit a certain level, you were like, oh no, I'm already there. Like it's not like the level's got to be up here. It's like you realize you were already at whatever level. There wasn't a level, right? You were already there. And I think that's a really
Yeah.
interesting thing to see happen when you suddenly go, oh, like it, I can just do this. I can do this. Like, would that be fair to say? Do you feel like that relationship with yourself changed?
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Because it shifted the world. Because the thing that happened, I'll just say it, I won't say names or anything, but what happened was I was considering going into a leadership role, like sales management or something. And I was like, no, 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 I'm not even going to approach that conversation until I hit a certain milestone in terms of how much cash I'm collecting every month. And then someone else who closes that a way lower percentage than me just swooped in and just took it. I was just like, what the fuck? Was this what we're doing? Then I realized and I took a step back and look around. Everyone who has what they want, who's where they want to be, who's where I want to be. Only difference is that they had the courage to fucking go for it.
Mm,
Meanwhile, I'm here thinking, well, I'll ask after I like collect, like 300K more. And it's like, because I thought I wasn't worthy yet until
mm,
I did XYZ thing.
yeah.
But that's not true.
It's an amazing realization, that is, and it's a tough one to have, because you can be told it as much as you want, but until you actually believe that, it doesn't quite change, right? Like that side, that I'm worthy, I'm enough. That's a recurring theme for how I try and approach people, because that's something that I've always struggled with. I still battle that, just in personal life, not just sales or anywhere, but in general. So it's an amazing transformation when you can hit that. Do you feel, when you hit that in the sales side and you kind of hit that realization, and it was kind of like you've seen everyone else doing all this and you're like, I could have done that, I could have been there, and you went for it, was there anything that built up to that, do you feel? Because I know I watched your interview with Sean Ray you did recently. I think that was recent anyway, but I watched it either way. And at one point you mentioned that when you met him first, you were like this little shell of a person, and things like that. How does the two connect for you, with the sales gig and like you growing in your skills and your ability there, and then like the personal side that, maybe let's say when you're on camera and when you're off camera, right? Like on calls, off calls. What's the relationship or correlation to that there, do you feel?
I think sales gave me the vehicle to become the 2.0 version of myself, even in real life or outside of sales. Um, so to me, there's no disconnect anymore. Before, when I was a little shell of a person, I had to fake it on my calls. But now it's the same. Like I'm the same person everywhere. Um, so the relationship is by becoming the kind of person I had to become to help prospects, I became the person I needed to become to level up in terms of my career as well, and in my personal life and in my relationships and everything. Like while I was, oh, this is a cool parallel, I think. While I was having those shifts in myself in terms of my career, I also stopped taking shit in my dating life too.
Mm,
Like
yeah,
I was like, I need to be congruent, but it happened almost subconsciously, you
yeah,
know?
yeah,
I also started being more honest with my friends. Like, so it all happens congruently. I
yeah.
think if you are all in, that's the thing, you got to be all in for it to happen congruently. If you're only like, I'm going to be all in on sales and I'm going to become this person on my calls, but then in your real life, you're not taking care of yourself. You're lying to your friends, you don't say anything to that friend who's been saying they want to start working out every week. They're like, I'll start on Monday. You don't call it
Mhm.
out. How can you do it on a sales call with a stranger?
Yeah. Yeah, I
So
agree. I agree with that. I think there's a common phrase that's used in like sales from the sales coach's point of view, which I half agree with, which is, how can you expect someone to invest 5K in your sales call if you haven't, or, equivalent. I think for me, the congruence, it's not related to the money, it's related to the personal responsibility that you're calling on that person. So it's not that you have to have invested in X or done exactly the thing, but it's what you're talking about there, right? You have to be congruent at that level. Are you taking the personal responsibility that you're questioning that person needs to? And I think that when you honestly do, I think a lot of things change and line up, and you can start. And then it's not like you're calling them out anymore. It's like you genuinely are asking, like, what's up with that? Rather than, finding a word track to call them out. You're just like, you said this. This happened on a call the other day. He was telling me one thing. It was quite personal, so I won't go into it. But he told me one thing at the start of the call, and then later on, he told me like the complete opposite. And I was like, hang on, like, can I just ask, like, what was that about? And this, and he was like, yeah, I caught that. And I was like, well, which is it? And it's like, but if you're not calling yourself out, you can't ever do that. So it's a really interesting dynamic, I think, with the personal relationship, with sales relationships and things like that, and how they fuse. Um, for you, where are you seeing yourself going next, right? Because obviously you've got the 2.0 you that you're hitting right now. Like, are you I guess, are you kind of looking at other levels of success, shall we speak? And there's a fear of success there, if you don't mind me asking so bluntly, and like you're trying to get somewhere else, or are you kind of cool with where you're at and it's just about like doubling down on things? Like, where's that for you?
Oh, I'm nowhere near cool. Oh, hell no. I want a lot more. I need a lot more. Well, maybe not need. I want a lot more. And so I know that I want to make a massive impact. I know that I want to partner up with people who are doing big things, who are just, there's levels to the game. So I want to make a big, big impact. As far as the specifics of what that looks like, I know that in the future. I don't know how near, but I want to I want to put together my own events. That's the first time I'm saying it out loud actually to someone. Um,
Awesome.
but yeah, I want to facilitate events. I want to get people into rooms. I want to really train on a really deep freaking level because the transformation I had, there's no reason it had to take that long. You know, it
Mm,
didn't need to take a year. I want to almost create something where I can help people get there like a lot faster
yeah.
in terms of the internal stuff too, not just the sales stuff,
Mm,
you know?
that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's really cool. That's exciting. I like that. And I guess you're already having a big impact on a lot of people with, the podcast you do and your videos you post, and obviously the coaching you're doing as well in the box, right? Like you're kind of putting that in there. When you're in those situations, so when you're in that coaching thing and you're seeing people come through, what I'm probably gonna ask a couple questions, and I was gonna go one direction, but I'm gonna ask a different one. What's one of the things that you see more commonly? And again, we're not obviously naming names or calling anything out, but what's one of the things you see more commonly when people are you're coaching people that you recognize you were like that and you wish you could have changed it sooner, or you kind of it's kind of recurring thing. You're like, oh, I remember thinking that way. What's the most common things you see there?
Yeah. So can I give two, like an internal and an external one?
For sure. Yeah.
So the external one is just that people are so worried about what to say next on their sales calls that they're not listening. And I used to be just like that. And that's why
Yeah.
now when I coach, I always say, pretend you and the prospect are the only two people in the world. Nothing
Mhm.
matters. Even what you say next doesn't matter. Just listen. Because then what you say next will resonate. It will be the right thing because you were listening instead of thinking of the next, like trying to think of what word track or what analogy to use. It's like, just listen, you know?
Yeah.
That's the external, like more sales thing. The internal thing that I noticed though, still sales related, of course, is just that people are afraid to piss off the prospect. They think that if they do say what's on their mind, that the person will hang up and then they'll get fired. It's like, relax. No one's going to die if you call someone out on something they're being incongruent on. No, the worst thing that's going to happen, because you were trained in the box too. Yes, no, F you, hang up.
Mhm. Yeah.
And most people are too nice to hang up, so you're fine. You know, people just don't have the courage to stir the pot a little bit on their calls, but that's what you need to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think that comes from what we've already talked about? That not necessarily the incongruence, but that fear of the success, the fear of doing something they're unsure of if they're worthy of, or something like that. Or do you feel there's historically just been a lot of weight on, in the marketing in the older days of sales training, it was like you just need these few words to say, and so people are looking for that, or do you think it's something else even?
Mm, I'm going to give you a super wild card answer because I think this is really the core of it.
Mhm.
People people don't want whatever their North Star is, why they got into sales. Let's say just the financial goal, let's say.
Mhm.
They don't want it badly enough that they're willing to burn everything to the ground to get it.
Mm.
Because once I made that switch, I don't care if the prospect hangs up. And guess what? No one has hung up on
Mm.
me since November of last year. Why? Because even though I'm calling them out, I'm saying things they don't want to hear, I'm asking uncomfortable questions, it's coming from a very real place of I want to help you, and I don't care if that means burning you
Mm.
because it's so genuine. I don't get the boogeyman of them hanging up. And so that's why I say where it comes from, people being afraid to do those things, people not having the conviction in themselves is because they don't want it badly enough. And I know that
Mm.
might hurt some people or sting some people, but guess what? If it stings, the shoe fits. True. Like, do something about it if it stung.
Mm. Okay. So I think that's an interesting topic for people as well then. So when you say they don't want it bad enough to burn everything down, it's a parallel, isn't it, to the fear of success and
Yep.
worthiness and all that as well. Like it comes in. So I guess it's an obvious question is which one comes first? And I guess it would be the wanting it bad enough to break through the other one, I
Yeah.
imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So how would you explain to someone, let's say they came to you and they said, you were having that session with them and they were explaining things and you said, look, based on what you've said, you don't want this bad enough to risk everything else. And they say, okay, how do I know, or how do I grow through that? Like, how would I become wanting it bad enough, for want of a better term? What would you say to them?
Really sit down, just like what we do with our prospects, and think about what's at stake.
Mm.
Think about why you want it in the first place, because a lot of people's goals are not the real goal. How do I know? Because that used to be me.
Mm-hmm.
I used to say, "Oh yeah, I want to retire my parents," and it's funny because you hear me saying this on other podcasts that I did earlier on a few months ago, even. My goal is to retire my parents, yay! Because it's the politically correct thing to say. It sounds great, it's fluffy and beautiful and amazing, and it's like that wasn't enough. I didn't want to retire them that bad because it wasn't enough for me to get out of my comfort zone and risk, you know, someone hanging up or something. So that couldn't have been it. And so really sit down, ask yourself, why am I doing this? Why am I putting myself in a position to get rejected every day? That's psychotic. We're crazy. So why are you doing this?
Mm.
And what's at stake? What's at stake if you don't make 20,000 a month, if that's your goal? Like what's really at stake, and why are you taking on that responsibility to do it?
Mm.
No one has to retire their parents. No one has to build orphanages. No one has to, I don't know, end world. No one has to end world hunger. And no one has to do any of that crap.
Mm.
So it's like, why do you want to actually do that? Because I promise most people, their real goal is not going to be the politically correct thing. The politically correct thing comes after. It's like, once you've actually created enough money that you can be concerned about world hunger, take care of that if you're passionate about that, you know? But right now, why are you really doing this?
Mm.
Because I thought it was to retire my parents because it sounded good. What it really was to prove to myself that I can lead. That's it. But
Mm.
that goes really deep for me personally because I've never felt like a leader in my life.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. I like that. I read a book a few months back called Be Your Future Self Now by Dr. Benjamin Hardy. Great book. And that talks about that. It's more about who you're going to become rather than what you're going to do. And it's who you're going to become allows you to do all the other things. But it's not about that being the goal. It's about who you're able to be. And then there's obviously, the classics of um, a lot of personal development people who talk about, become a millionaire, not because of what you get, but because of who you need to become one. And things like that.
Mm.
I think that speaks to that. I think that's a great thing to look at. Um, I like that. For you then, with when people look at where they're trying to go and they build that future out and we're going through it. I used to get some of my guys on the teams I managed literally to run a sales call on themselves, like as in write it down, what happens if you don't do this and all that, the cliche sales roles, but doing it themselves. And that really helps them, I feel, get realigned with it and kind of do that. And then what they also do is it allows you to ask a prospect in the same way, right? Because you understand why you're asking it, not just that you're asking it. If for you to kind of really dig deep into that, what would just be, I know this is getting quite deep, but what would just be one or two things someone could take away from this episode that they could action? And I'm not saying this is going to solve their life. I'm not asking you to, like, become a therapist for everyone who's listening, but I just mean, what was like one or two steps that you've taken or you've seen people take, they could take away from this and just start that journey, at least start exploring what success or future or the thing that they're aiming for that they could look for.
What you said about running the process on yourself, I think that's a really good action step for people to take, but like really do it. Not just like, oh yeah, 20K a month so I can buy a house and get whatever car. No, like really do it, because when I really did it, that's how I was able to realize that my politically correct goal wasn't the real one. And if you don't mind, I want to share like what was at stake for me. So you can, because I never want what I say to be just like, oh, this was so motivational. This is so great. Like, I want it to be like, shit, like, okay. You know what I mean? Like, I want you to understand where, like, how deep you really need to go with this exercise of actually putting yourself through the sales call. So, when I kept it superficial, right? When I kept it politically correct, what was at stake was like, oh, my dad has to work really hard and potentially die early. And it's like, okay, that's heavy. But unfortunately, it wasn't enough to get me out of bed with that fire that I want it so badly, I'm willing to burn everything else to the ground. Because my dad loves working. He loves what he does. So it's like, it's not really, So when I really did, what was at stake was, if I don't prove to myself that I can really lead and start with myself, there was no reason for me to live.
Wow.
That was what was at stake. It was like, it's either I prove this to myself or so. And you might want to put a trigger warning. So sorry, I didn't think about that until after I said it. But it's just like, when you really go deep with yourself, and you extract the real North Star, the real reason why you want to go all in on sales and be really good at it. Now you'll have the real fire that's going to get you up every day. And when a prospect says something that doesn't make any sense, you're going to call it out. Because if you don't, what's at stake? So that's why I think that's really, really, that's the biggest thing anyone can do that would move the needle for them.
Yeah. I agree. I agree completely. For me, it was always as well, to try and understand it better, was just keep asking what then, what then, what then. So it's like with the what's at stake, it's like, okay, and what does that mean? And it's like this, and it's like, okay, but what then? And then what then? And go like over 5 layers deep, because you can. Obviously, on a sales call, you're probably not going to go that deep. I mean, you might with some, but you don't need to. But for yourself, I think that's when it becomes a lot more real, because then you start to unpeel it, right, and you actually get to it. So when you've got that, and when you've done that, how do you need to personally, or how do you keep that front and center? So now you've got that thing, you've got something that you're like, this is my North Star again, but not every day you're going to wake up raring to go, I imagine. I mean, you might do, but on those days where it's clouded or you're not sure, how do you kind of bring yourself back to that?
I need a physical reminder right in front of me. So on my monitor, like, I have a little post-it that says all in. It's also heavy. I don't love the theme, but it's literally, I've got to be honest, I don't want to lie. It says all in or someone dies.
Mhm. Yeah.
That's what it says. And so I have to remind myself, because sometimes, there's, for a variety of reasons, anyone can just lose sight of why they're here in the first place. And now I'm so passionate about that, since I'm on the other side of the lack of belief in myself, lack of conviction, lack of worthiness, all the bullshit. And I'm on the other side of it. I'm so passionate about helping other people come out on the other side too. Because when I tell you sales gave me my life, that's why I say it like that. It really did. Because before that, before sales, I was floating around like a leaf in the wind, doing whatever would make me money, whatever looked good, whatever made my mom happy. I was in nursing school. Before that, I was teaching. So it's like when you really go deep with yourself, it's a piece of cake doing it with a prospect,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, 100%. And I don't think that theme is something you have to like apologize for. Obviously, you know that, but I mean, even for the sake of this, I think that's it's very real, it's very raw. And I think that shows the level that you're understanding yourself at. You know, for someone to feel, if someone was like, oh, that's too deep, chances are they probably haven't gone deep enough to understand themselves yet, then in that case, if they're not even understanding that. So I think that shows, the level you've gone down to, and I give you a lot of respect for that, and holding that. It's a sacred place to hold. So, power to you on that. Um, with this
Yeah.
then, so it's fear of success, right? That was the topic to begin with. So we had that fear of success. So people can break through that. We need to get into that North Star. We need to understand where we're actually going. We need to understand we're already worthy, right? So it's not about that the North Star is when you become worthy. It's you're already worthy to get there. That's kind of like one of the big steps they're going to have to make. Getting clear on that is another thing, right? So they've got to go through there. Tying this all back to someone who's in sales, like the majority of people that are just, we've got people like yourself who are excelling, doing really good, and putting a lot of passion into this. You've also got the other side completely where they're just kind of floating around, that they don't really want to be in sales, and they're not going to make the changes they want to make either. There's a big section in the middle where they see people like yourself, and see other people who are doing really, really well. They're not quite they're not quite clicking yet. How do you feel we can help them want it enough, if that makes sense? Like, because it's a big ask for some people to actually go that deep on themselves, right? How would you help someone who's in that position? Do you feel like just start to maybe consider it? Because the not everyone watching this is right there burning yet. Like going, I just need to figure this out. There's plenty of people who are like, I make 5, 6K a month. I'm doing better than I would anywhere else, but there might be more. What would you say to someone like that to just, set them in a similar direction?
First thing I would ask someone who's comfortable financially, I'd be like, well, is that enough? Because they're going to be like, no. Like, okay, well, now we're in the game. We're in the conversation now.
Yeah.
And it's like, I would just keep asking why? So the first question is that enough? No. Why? Oh, because I want to have a better life than this. This is great, but I want more for my family. Usually it's for someone else. Usually
Hmm.
it's to create something better for their family
Yeah.
or, I don't know, for someone else. Because when people are at that place, they don't have enough love for themselves, worthiness for themselves to do it for themselves. So they got to do it for someone else.
Yeah.
So start
I
off
think,
doing it for someone else. That's just like me. I started off like I wanted to retire my dad. That was why that was what was moving me until I got to a certain point where it wasn't enough.
mhm.
And that point for me was 10 to 15K a month, honestly, where I was just like, all right, well, I need more to fuel me.
Yeah. I think that's a great point. I do. I think we do so much for other people and so little for ourselves. And that's actually one of the things I say to people right before I pitch on a sales call. I say, I won't say the other things. It's very specific to one of the offers I'm on that I use a lot. But the other one is, I say there's two things. One is that we don't prioritize ourselves, and we're more willing to help other people. But in this instance, we've already discovered that you're the problem here. And if you don't prioritize yourself, you're letting everything else down as well. So, do you feel you're in a place where you're ready to actually take that responsibility on? And I like to do it that way. I'm a very gentle person in sales calls. I'm not like Bill. I'm not like those guys where they can like just cut it down. I'm quite gentle, but I do like to really bring that responsibility in and understanding. But I think you're right. I think a lot of people maybe they don't love themselves. I think that that's a personal journey for a lot of people, but they definitely don't prioritize themselves. So, like you said, they do start doing it for other people. And I think that's a great, it's a worthy cause. But I do think the sooner you can realize that you're worth your own love, you can go so much further. Because again, until you do that, you can't help the other person on the end of the call do that for themselves. So that I think that's a great point. I really like that. I resonate with that a lot. Um, yeah, I like this. This
Yeah,
has
and
been an interesting conversation.
yeah, I didn't expect it to go that deep, but it's like that's the game, you
Mm,
know? I think a lot of people they are afraid to go that deep with themselves, and they even a lot of people can be put off by like, holy shit, like, they rather watch podcasts or videos of things where it's just like, here are the sales tactics, here's the word tracks, here's how you do this. And that stuff doesn't matter as much as the deeper stuff.
mhm.
We all have access to some type of training. If you don't, you know where to find me. But yeah, we all have access to something, right? And
Yeah.
so it's like, are you worthy enough? Do you respect? I like this question. Do you have more respect for your fear or for your goals?
Mm,
Because when I really started asking myself that, it hit so much harder when I ask prospects because I
yeah.
really know.
Yeah. Yeah. And it allows you to, I think when you've done it yourself, it allows you to understand if the other person has received that thought process properly when they answer you. Because a lot of people just hear the answers and then carry on. And they're just like, yeah, of course I do. And they're like, oh, great, tick that box. And it's like, but when you know the weight that has carried for you, you know if someone else has clocked it as well. And they go, and then you can kind of challenge it and be like, walk through it. No, I like that a lot. One other question. This is kind of going back up into the shallows a little after this such deep conversation. I remember a post you made a while ago, probably in the box somewhere, about realizing that you could have this level of conversation in a B2B sort of environment as well on a sales call, right? And I think that's a big mental block for a lot of people is this is fine if I'm doing coaching, sales, or I'm doing this, but when I'm just talking to someone in a B2B, like they don't want to have this conversation. And I think that's a big, I think a lot of people think that. What was the thing for you that clicked when you realized, hang on, I can actually have this conversation with those people? And what was the result of that?
What clicked was I had the courage to just go for it a lot of times, fall on my face a lot of times. But then a prospect, I finally did it properly and it landed and the prospect opened up about how he wanted legacy.
Mm,
And that's what a lot of people who are already successful want. That's why they're on your call. And it's interesting because people do feel like, oh, they don't want to have that conversation. That's
mm,
exactly the conversation they want to have. A lot of them don't even know they want to have that conversation until someone has the balls to ask them. And that's what made me realize, oh my gosh, what made this call different is that I actually had the courage to ask.
mm,
Because most people will be like, oh, okay, you want to diversify your portfolio? Check. I know their goals. That's not enough.
mm,
For what though? Why? It's just like we were saying, ask why. Why? Not in an annoying way. You got to do it with finesse. Got to do it tactfully, right? Because these people have been on a lot of calls as well. But it's like once you do it properly, you realize their pain is not, oh, my portfolio is not diverse enough. Their pain is when I die, am I leaving enough for my family?
mm.
Is anyone going to remember me? Depending on the level they're at financially, some are closer to Elon Musk, some are a little bit further from Elon Musk, right? But that's their pain.
Yeah,
Once you get that and you have the courage to ask, it'll freaking change the game in terms of your B2B calls
yeah.
because they're all people.
Mhm. What was the result? I know it's an obvious answer, but for people who are still like, I don't know if I can, and what was the result when you started doing that to B2B people? Like what happened then?
Oh, I was shit in the beginning. But the results were people thanked me at the end of the call.
Mm,
Thank you so much for having an actual conversation with me because everyone else is just the same conversation. They whether they close or not, they thank me for having a real conversation with them. And guess what
mm.
ends up happening as a result? Most of them close.
Yeah, yeah, that's it. That's it. No, that's great. I think that's what a lot of people need to hear. I think obviously we're gonna wrap this up because I've got to honor your time. I know we've kind of coming up to the end here, but first of all, I really do appreciate your time. I really appreciate you being on. Your podcast is way more viewed than mine, so I'm honored to have you on. And it's been great conversation. One of the things though I think a lot of people are waiting for, and this ties into everything you've talked about, and you just mentioned it there, is they're waiting for the courage to do it. And I think that's a phrase that a lot of people are waiting on. I saw a post the other day is like the biggest regret some people had was I never had the courage to do the things I wanted to do or something like that. And it's always made me think because courage, this is something I had to wrestle with a long time, but courage isn't a thing you get. Courage is the outcome of what you've done. So you aren't waiting for courage, you've been courageous, is a better way to look at that, I feel. So it's not that you have the courage to do it because that's not a thing that can come upon us, if this makes sense. It's more about you do it and that means you had courage, if that makes sense. And I think a lot of people, they're waiting for something to come. Oh, now I feel courage. It's like, no, no, no. Courage is what we call when you've done the thing. It doesn't come. It's not a feeling, it's an action. And I think that's for you, I think that's a really great link up to what you just said there. You had the courage to do it, but also feeling worthy, having that, shedding the skin 2.0, all kind of links for me, and I think it's a great full circle. It's not about waiting for the courage, it's about realizing you're already worthy, you can already love yourself, find your North Star, and then act on it in a way that you're willing to burn everything down. I think if we were to sum up the whole conversation, that would be it for me. But I guess does that resonate with you? Do you feel that's a fair review of everything?
Hell yeah, that was a beautiful, like you tied it up into a neat little bow. I couldn't have done it better.
Well, everyone knows where my podcast is, and I've just been endorsed, so it's but all
Yeah.
good.
No, really, like you're awesome. I'm really impressed by the questions that you ask because yeah, I'm used to getting asked bad questions. No offense. No offense, everyone else.
All good, all good. Well, no, again, Princess, I really do appreciate your time. I really appreciate this, and just going to continue in a non-creepy way, watching your success from the sidelines, as you kind of grow through everything else. And you know, I'm sure you've heard it all, and you've done that, but like it has been that difference in the last 12, 18 months or whatever is like it's been incredible changes. And obviously, getting into the objection box, not that that's your identity, but just having that, I'm sure, is just a great feeling for you as well. So looking forward to seeing what you do. And again, appreciate having you on.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. All right. Well, I will put a link to your podcast and everything in the description as well. Is there anywhere people can go to find out other things or anything else you want to share with them? And we can put it on the description. But if you want to do a little shout out, that's fine as well.
For now, just my podcast. That's where people can follow and learn all the things. I really make a big effort to put a ton of value and like nuggies into my episodes, bring on people who can really share the game as opposed to just motivational fluff. So, yeah.
Awesome. Brilliant. Well, I'll send them all your way.